Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Eliana Aaron. It's May 4th, 2020. I wanted to talk to you today about using a different scale so we could track how well we are doing in Israel and how well other countries are doing using logarithmic scales. So logarithmic scales, instead of tracking absolute changes over time, the purpose of these scales is to track the rate of change over time. And that's very important when we're looking at trends to understand where we are in terms of the virus, how to identify, besides just raw numbers, how to identify in those raw up and down numbers when we actually do have rates of change that are changing significantly, potentially identifying another wave. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I selected a number of countries here to be representative of the of different countries, including Israel, United States, of what's been going on since the end of January. And this is going to show you in time how countries have changed. Now, a logarithmic scale is not a normal scale. It's not the kind of scale you see normally on the groups that I'm sending them out on. What happens is each section exponentially grows by tenfold. So a normal scale, everything is evenly spaced, and what you have here is 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, a million, and 10 million. Obviously, we haven't got 10 million at all in the world. But what this does is it's helping us to track through this method of calculation what the rate changes are so that we can track trends more accurately than just the daily numbers as they come in. So it is going to give us a different vision of what's happening. And I'm going to go ahead and play this for you. And if you take a look, we can see that as the dates go, Israel is now on the map. Sorry. I'll go ahead and show that to you after. And what you can see is that as countries start stabilizing, there's a sharp decline on this scale, which tells us clearly who is going into a national remission. It does not mean the cases are over. It means that the case loads and the rate of growth has gone down significantly. Now, it's not a perfect situation. If you take a look here at China, and I know we can't really rely on China's reporting, but what we have here is there was a little bit of an up and down situation. What we're looking for is two things. When we're moving in this direction, this is exponential growth here. This is that we double our cases in 2 days. Most countries did not do that for very long or at all. This is total confirmed cases. So you can see here the US, as we know, has over 1 million cases. And this is, as of a few days ago, it does take time to get this into the system. But the US, for example, is now flatlined. So there's different parts of the range. If we look at the US, we had a pretty high growth rate, then we flattened out. And what happens after it actually flattens out is that the numbers start to come down. And we are starting to see that slowly, although each state is going through its own epidemiological curve. This is a good sign for now. What we're seeing in a country like France is that we are now in a sharp decline. So they're actually starting, their rate is starting to go down. The daily new numbers are coming down. And that's very significant as well. In a country like Singapore, what happened at the very beginning, if you look at the red line, oops, I just left, that went to Sweden. Hold on, let's get back to Singapore. Hello. Here's Singapore. All right, so if you look at the beginning, we had a sharp decline and then we had a second wave. Things opened up and their numbers started climbing again. And now Singapore is starting to flatline, as you can see, but they're still getting a significant number of cases. And they actually now have more cases than Israel. In countries from the Southern Hemisphere, again, Brazil has not even started flatlining. You can see there it's still going up. Argentina is also going up, although at a slower pace. They're more south, obviously, than Brazil. And we can also see the countries that are doing very well. Australia dipped down very nicely, and they've stayed in that direction. They're still getting cases every day, but they're getting less than 100 cases every day at this point. New Zealand is also getting very few cases a day, because again, the further down they are on that, the less cases they're getting. Israel right now is all the way down here in terms of where we are going to be when it's reflected. So Israel here, as you can see, has sharply turned down in the last few days. And what we are now is we're about over here where Australia is. And we can also see, for those of us who are from England, that England has flattened out but has not started dipping down. So they're still getting quite a few new cases. Every week, 33,000 new cases are showing up, but we are not growing from there. We haven't, our rate has not gone up from there. The second wave has not hit, and hopefully it won't for a long time. And so that's important to know. Sweden over here also has not started dipping down. We talked about Sweden a number of times. So this is an interesting way for us to track what's going on. Again, on this scale, what we have is Israel is actually sharply declining at this point, which is why the Israel is able to open up business. And to keep tracking of the rate is actually very important, and I'm going to keep monitoring that as time progresses to determine that we are remaining in a safe place, and also to start finding the early trends of the second wave when that hits. Hopefully not before the fall. What I wanted to talk about also is another issue, and that is the thing that's killing most people from coronavirus is actually a different kind of pneumonia than most doctors have ever seen before. Pneumonia, normally when it hits people, they're going to have acute shortness of breath. It's going to be pretty quick. They're going to cough. They're going to be feverish. They're not going to feel well, and they're going to seek medical attention. Somehow this virus is attacking the lungs in a way that is more subtle and is allowing people to actually compensate. So what happens is, if you climb a mountain like Mount Everest, if you climb very quickly, your lungs will exhibit a lot of symptoms of lack of oxygen, and people can die, and your oxygenation levels can go down. But what goes on when you climb Mount Everest, not that I have and not that I'm planning to, is that you stop along the way for periods of time to adapt to the low oxygen levels, and then slowly your body gets used to low oxygen levels and you don't get altitude sickness. What's happening with coronavirus is something similar. And this is something that doctors have not seen, which is that by the time people are getting symptoms, they are critically ill and their oxygenation levels are below the level that is compatible with life, because their bodies have gotten used to it. They've been sick for a week or 2 weeks. The only symptom that a lot of them have is a very slight shortness of breath and sometimes no fever. And by the time they start really getting symptomatic, it's late. So the fever doesn't always happen. What happens with people who are critically ill and therefore the most contagious is their oxygen level goes down. And their body compensates so that they feel okay. I mean, again, if I'm in a hospital and I have a patient with a 50% pulse oximetry, or the percentage of oxygen binding onto their hemoglobin is 50% instead of 95% or higher, you know, I'm thinking that person's going to have brain damage and organ damage and things like that. And with corona, it's like climbing Mount Everest. Your body has adapted to these low levels. So one of the things that I think is going to end up becoming an essential part of screening, and should become an essential part of screening, is a pulse oximeter. This is a lot cheaper than a ventilator. Okay, a ventilator means you caught it too late. This is something where if this could be used more routinely in primary care, then you can end up having a situation where you can screen people from home. This is not expensive. In the United States, these cost between $50 and $100, usually around $70 what I saw. In Israel, they cost somewhere around 200 to 300 shekels, depending on the model. And it's extremely easy. You literally turn it on and you just open it up, you stick your finger in, and there's a reading. I think it's going to be backwards for you guys, but I'll show it to you. And it's showing that I have 97% oxygen. Okay, so it's backwards, sorry about that, which means that I don't have corona in my lungs, okay? This can be wiped down with alcohol, cleaned between people. This is probably more accurate than the temperature checking. The temperature checking is problematic for a few reasons. A lot of the types of temperature checking that are going on now before you go into stores is infrared. Infrared is not as accurate as other forms of temperature checking. It's the only one where you don't have to touch somebody, so it's popular. But most people who actually get this disease don't have sustained temperatures. They'll say, I had a temperature for a few hours or maybe for a day. And it's not a high temperature, it's a pretty low temperature. A lot of people say, yeah, I kind of think I had a fever, I didn't even take the temperature. So it's a little bit of a problem to do that. However, the oxygenation level remains low. So that actually may be a more sustainable and reliable way to monitor how people are doing. So it's something for consideration. Again, we've never had something like this going on before, but it is something to consider, especially as the second wave is going to be bigger than the first wave. And we do have to get ready for that, and we have to prepare. My company is prepared. One of the things that we are doing going into next year is we have face shields for our health providers along with masks. And we're going to be doing screenings as well as pulse oximetry when people have any kind of respiratory symptoms. So I think it's important to be ready and prepared. I also think it's important to track some of these trends, and I wanted to share that with you today. I hope everyone stays well, stays healthy, stays home as much as they can. Even though the malls are opening in Israel, I think it's going to take time for people to run out and participate in normal activities until we feel that we're going to be safe doing that. Take care, everybody.